Truly a sight to behold. A man, beaten. A once great champ, Lou Diamond. Now, a study in moppishness. No longer the victory-hungry stallion we've raced so many times before, but a pathetic, washed-up, aged ex-champion.
Want to learn from those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level? Best-selling author of Master the Art of Connecting and professional speaker Lou Diamond is here to connect you to some of the most inspiring and amazing people on the planet. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another amazing, spectacular, fantabulous episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today on Thrive Loud, we have the Pivot Catalyst. She has coached, consulted, and trained hundreds of leaders around the world to generate extraordinary momentum toward achieving their objectives. She is the founder and president of Abrige Corp, which offers the 10-time business and leadership private peer advisory groups and aligned momentum programs and software that transform performance management into performance momentum. I'm going to love this conversation because we've got, the whole world's been trying to pivot, and we've got the one who helps to catalyze all of that. Thrive Loud listeners, Michele Leavitt. Lori, how are you today?
Hi, Lou. I'm doing great.
She's doing so great, and she's coming to us from lovely Washington State, where it's probably really nice right now this time of year. Is it nice?
Today is. It's been rainy. Missed that on my trip to Mexico, but today is lovely. I brought the sun back with me.
She brought the sun with us. She's brought some inspiration, and throughout her entire career, she's been doing some pretty cool stuff. This is what I want to do. I want to bring our listeners up to speed, Lori, a little bit. I want to rewind and kind of understand specifically how pivoting kind of became your gig.
So, one, I've done several pivots in my life, both business and personal. In fact, they usually do go together.
Very good.
And one of the reasons, my first book is called The Pivot, Orchestrating Extraordinary Business Momentum. And why I was compelled to write that book is that there's so much talk, even back in 2017 in the startup world, about pivots, which are as if they were quick. And you talked about sport analogy. So quick, like a basketball move and that shuffle with your feet. And you know what? In corporate, they are not quick. And we as leaders need to orchestrate those. So yes, are there quick changes involved? Yes, but it is orchestrating many shifts by many people over time. And so the Pivot Catalyst was, how do I catalyze that? How do I help leaders really move that huge vehicle around?
So, Lori, I'm going to give you a little bit of my familiarity with the word pivot throughout my life. I grew up playing a lot of basketball, so pivot was literally your pivot foot, and a very important thing to know. And a good pivot move was a key thing to do in basketball to add flexibility and adjust. As to your point, dealing with startup organizations later on in my life, the terms pivot was a company went in one direction and then recognized that they needed to shift and had to, by the way, usually sell that idea to a lot of investors. But to your point, larger corporations, it's harder to move those ships. And even more specifically, individuals over the last 2 years have all been, I hate to say this, probably overusing the term pivot in the way that they've all been adjusting and pivot how they do things. So what I really actually want to know is, have we been thinking about the term maybe too openness, or is there a better way to really think about what pivot makes the most sense for each person? I want to understand your thoughts of how you integrate that situation with leaders that you deal with.
Yeah. And I'll I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing the pandemic, but I'm going to use this as an example because probably a lot of leaders are feeling really proud of how their teams were able to pivot quickly during the pandemic, like the manufacturers who then shifted to creating PPE. Great. And yet the underlying requirement of that, the culture change that allows people to shift on their own when there isn't an urgency, but that there's something new that you're going toward, it requires more leadership. People are tired now. Yes, they had that in them during that urgent situation, but it's not that it's not long-term. What should I say? I use the term aligned momentum because if a leader can orchestrate that state in their business, people will continue to shift on their own every day the way they need to, and the leader doesn't have to keep pushing to get it done. It's actually they're creating a magnetic pull in order for people to say, oh, wait, here's where we're going. This is what I did yesterday. Does that work or not? And then make that change. And so in my mind, that quick shift is, those really small steps that people take to make the change because they understand where they're going, and they're not just relying on what they did yesterday.
So I think that's the key thing. And I know this sounds really strange, but for some reason, some people feel that the shift that they make in the way they do things is an all-out change. Like you said, a pivot in the direction you're doing things. Let's make something clear. We are all focused, and we do this on the show, and you've been doing it your whole career, moving onward and upward. We're all moving down that same path. It's just never always a straight line, right? It's never a straight line going across. There are always slight adjustments. There are always adaptations to market conditions, to changes with who you work with, to your competitors, your customers. And this is the question I want to lead to here is things are only picking up in speed and how quickly we need to adapt and pivot and make the right adjustment at the right time. Question I have has to do with capacity. In your work that you're doing with top leaders and performers out there, all these changes and the speed of business, it's really hard to stay the course and necessarily make those adjustments and pivots. How do you help these top performers balance the speed of business and the decisions that are required to continue to see the success that they're trying to achieve?
My first words of advice would be to stop pushing and that you don't know it all. Mm-hmm. So high achievers, and I'm one, I confess. And so I've had to unlearn a lot of traits that I had. I made that shift from expert to consultant, which is expert, to leader, which is maybe you're an expert, but that is not your role. Your role is not to be an expert. Your role is to be a leader. And you can choose to feel like you have to know it all and push people. And you know what? It is going to be slow if it works at all. And whatever works is going to be short term because people aren't feeling it in their heart, in their soul, I'm aligned with this role. It's not just what I do in the role. It's what I am not just valued in this organization for it, but I feel like I'm expressing my gifts in this role. And I know I just jumped to this huge thing. And that's why I say orchestration, because leaders need to be modeling this way and consistently addressing themselves and others. It's not just all about them. It's probably all about you to start, and not all about you, about what you know, but how you are being that allows others to be open to choose to change.
I think it's an interesting take here, Lori. I want to go down this road. I didn't know where this conversation would go when we started, but which is why we're pivoting along the way here, pun intended. I think we have never had more generations all working at the same time at any point in
Mhm.
history as we do right now. And I say this specifically as literally my son is now entering the same workforce that I'm in, right? So we, throw another generation into the mix that I'm familiar with. And I actually believe that it's those that have been working for a longer periods of time that we're used to a way that was much more rigid. So we're actually like bridging back and forth. I want to equate it to music and what we used to listen to, because we're about the same age. I'm gathering here without going down that avenue. But the general idea is like, look, we remembered LPs, 8-track tapes, cassette tapes,
Mhm.
DVDs or CDs, and then into MP3s, and then whatever the heck we utilize today into streaming world, right? That's multiple components of change. And along the way, we remember, and certain things are the way we use, and certain music is the way we remember it. And we remember the changes. But the newer generations have already adapted so quickly that certain things that were rigid and didn't allow those flexibilities, career paths, length of time of working, knowing that the norm is going to change before you even get there,
Mhm.
is one of the more interesting dynamics I think that we're facing. And that is that there's a whole world that would think a pivot is a much bigger change than what everybody else is adapting. One, do you agree with this little analogies I've put together? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's still that I mean, what you're saying is that there is so much change that who do we think we are that we know? So in my book, my more recent book, Pivot to Clarity, which took forever to write because getting clear about being clear was not so easy, and especially during the pandemic. And the first section of the book is about getting clear.
Yeah.
So we as leaders need to get clear, or a leader of your life, whichever you're doing, need to get clear about the future. But that clarity isn't the clarity you're thinking. It's not knowing. It's a feeling that and where you're going, but you're not going to know how. You are not going to know how. And if you step into that strategic planning session and instantly you're focused on this year and what exactly you can do next, you are going to be behind change. Already a year from now, you are going to be farther behind. And so we need to let go of this knowing of the ways we even did this data collection and the SWOT, and we still can do those, but we do those when we know we're in the point of executing toward this bigger, this fuzzier place we're going. But please allow yourself to go to that fuzzy place and create a culture where people can speak up and say, hey, you know what? We're no longer using CDs. What's that? Whatever they say, what's in the context of your organization, because you don't know.
If you were to look at the leaders who are able to let go, and the ones who can keep the general direction, and to your exact, that create the line momentum within an organization, is there a certain quality or characteristic about that leader that you've seen more often than not, the ones who get it versus the ones who might be a little bit stuck on wanting to control and not let go?
Yeah, you talked about when we grew up. So I don't know if this.
I really
fits
never
with
grew
you,
up,
but
Lori. I want you to make that clear that I've been told I'm still 18 and no one has told me otherwise. So I'm just going to go with it. But anyway, yes, continue.
There you go. So I was in corporate before I became an entrepreneur in 2000. So I was in corporate before that for about 17 years, dating myself. And I was the decision support person. I was the person who analyzed what was happening and what should be done next.
Yeah.
And that was, I did that in a lot of different ways, but in general, that was always my role. And, it presumes that you can forecast details, right? And what happened was I did also a lot of mergers and acquisitions work. And when I did mergers and acquisitions work, I took the time in my due diligence to assess people.
Yeah.
I had to hide that.
Ooh, tell me more.
It was a bad thing to say that you looked at people as a financial expert. What was revered was my ability to financially model, to do the financial due diligence. People was HR, and it was seen as lesser than.
Isn't that so amazing, by the way? Because literally, I mean, that's literally what every most successful VC or private equity firm, it is the number one thing that they look at when they're making a decision, which is also ironic because in hiring the leaders of corporate, the number one thing they look at are the people that can do the job.
Do they? And yes, they do, but do they? Right? So mergers acquisition is a little tricky because it's often hush hush from all the people. And so there's got to be a way that you can, assess how the cultures are going to fit. And why I answered that a little snarkily with "are they?"
No, and it is a good point.
That you still see mergers and acquisitions that fail because of the culture clash after the merger happens, or it's usually an acquisition.
Right.
They're really rarely mergers, but that there's a culture clash. I mean, I give Microsoft an example they do so many things well, especially now. And I talk about them, the good and the bad, and we all make mistakes, but they've had acquisitions that when they acquired Avenue A, and I don't know how many billions it was for, and it did nothing because the culture was just a clash and they had to write it off. The people didn't want to work there. And this was not in the 80s or the 90s. That
was in the early 2000s. I remember. I remember the acquisition too. This is what makes, I think, your role so unique in this involvement, right? Because everyone is trying to be adaptable, adjustable, for lack of a word that doesn't exist, pivotable, right? They want to be able to be flexible to look at what they can do and the changes they need to. And so often that is a trait that leaders have. That is a trait that individuals have. That is, the ones who understand they need to be adaptable and flexible and not so stuck in one way of doing things. And to your point about unlearning certain things, it's really hard for corporate organizations to unlearn it, but it is more important than ever. And never has that veil been pulled back for us to see than over the last 2 years, because we've seen the ones who've been able to genuinely adapt and succeed in a very challenging environment, and those that really needed to rethink about the who is running an organization and how well they can do it.
Right. And don't mistake confidence for someone who doesn't unlearn, if that makes sense.
No, perfect.
So I remember working at one place and the president was very, I'm going to say arrogant, but very confident. And yet he did his homework. And there would be up and coming that would see him the way he was and just presumed that he was off the cuff. But he wasn't. He had done his homework. So they went into his office and hadn't done their homework, and he would let them have it.
Lori, I want to ask this question because you wear a lot of hats, and I want to know which one you like wearing the most. Between the coaching you do, the actual coaching work and trying to get the best out of people, the more training or workshop-y kind of thing where you're helping organizations develop the plan to generate the momentum that they need, the writing of the books that you create, or the ideation that you do to come up with the methodology. That's 4 separate hats that you wear as a leader. Which one of those you like wearing most?
And I have one more.
Oh, yeah.
I build software.
Yes, you code on top of all of that. Okay, so great.
Well, I don't code, but I create. Yes. My first software helped a lot of healthcare organizations move through HIPAA.
Yeah,
it was very successful, and it took someone who understood business and how businesses works and who you ask the questions to and how people change and how people can pivot in order to help those organizations move through faster than they could. And why I say that is that might be one of the ways that I do one thing. I catalyze momentum. It's just that in order to do that, many things support it.
Yeah.
So the coaching is rarely one-on-one. It is peer groups of leaders because it's bigger than me. And my personal shift from being a consultant to being a coach and facilitator was really rewarding to me. You know, it helped me unlearn the know-it-all and to zip and ask questions. And that, you know, any of those that are, so software on its own is not transformational.
Yeah.
So I would say what I appreciate doing the most is the consultative / coaching work with the leaders who can create that positive ripple of influence. And so many lives can be changed. So anything that's transformative, that it's not me that's doing it, I'm just creating the space, the energy, the framework for it. That's very rewarding.
I've got such a good question before I get to the signature question I love asking on the show, Lori. What type of organization or symptoms that you observe will you say, nope, I can't work with that type of organization? What are your, nope, it's not going to work. They are not going to get their momentum aligned. They're not going to catalyze that momentum, if you would, because of something that you see. What is something that will say, I cannot work with that organization? I see those signs and it won't work.
Well, there are 3 traits I look for in leaders, and this will answer your question. The 3 traits I look for are courage, which includes the willingness to be vulnerable. You know where this is going. Curiosity, you know a lot, but you don't know it all. And tenacity, you understand what it is to face the hard stuff, and you have what it takes to see it through. And you have what it takes to understand that others are going to go through hard stuff and to help lead them through it.
Nice.
And so if the leader of that organization does not have those 3 characteristics, they're likely not a fit to work with me.
Awesome. I love asking guests this question, Lori. I want to see where this goes. Congratulations to you and all the moves and pivots and things you've been doing in your career, your books, your success, which means you are mostly thriving. And that is why you're on this program. But as you and I both know, we don't all have days like that every single day. Not every day is a cakewalk. Sometimes we're not kicking on all cylinders. Lori, Michele Leavitt, when you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek, or maybe which individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
I'm going to say that, you know, emotion, we get in our own way. I mean, yeah. I mean, who blocks? If you're looking at what's blocking your momentum, it's typically starts with yourself. So all that mind stuff that happens, and we all have that happens. So a couple things. One, I often reach out to someone and give, like handing my book to someone, just meeting with them and listening, something where I am volunteering, giving of my time, or something helps me, you know, it's outside of me.
Yeah.
And that emotion that's about me, that I'm blocking me, can then go away. I also go for walks, and my walks are somewhat meditative. Okay. So rather than running something that's awful, going through my head over and over, dwelling on something, which I say because I did that years ago, don't do it anymore. And how I shifted from that, you know, you can't shift immediately from being someone who has that monkey mind to someone who's meditating for 30 minutes a day. It's just not a quick pivot. There just really are not quick, sustainable pivots. And so I learned these statements that work on your unconscious, similar to gratitude, except for these don't make sense per se. It's kind of hard to explain, like, what can I be, do, have, or receive to blank? And I just run those over and over, and it takes me out of me and creates a more positive energy. And now I do all of these things so quickly that everybody thinks that I'm always okay.
Well, that's a good way to be. I mean, as opposed to them asking if you don't feel good now.
And actually, I am mostly always okay because I don't get negative for very long. But we all have it happen. It's just we can choose how long that sticks.
Let's do the admin part of the show, Lori. Share with the listeners all the places people can find you, websites, URLs, places they can get your books, everything. We will put it in the show notes, but it gets way more engagement when they hear it from you.
Okay. So my main website is thepivoccatalyst.com. It can also be reached by my name, LoriMichelleLeavitt.com, same site. I have launched my second book, and I have a launch site where people can get some gifts with an order if they would like, which includes a training program and some time with me. And that is at pivottoclarity.com. And that's the name of the book. They could see the book series at thepivotbook.com. And I say the book series, there are now 2, there will be 7.
Wow.
And so,
okay.
So watch for the next one coming probably in about a year and a half from now, which is on a topic you and I just mentioned briefly, which is talent adaptability. Yeah. And if I may add to this call out, I would like to interview leaders, developing leaders, futurists, academics, if you are learners, that can talk to me about your thoughts on talent adaptability.
I'm raising my hand for you. I can't wait to
Thank
have a
you.
great conversation.
And if I may, there will be 3 sections. So the first 2 I'll be talking to people about. The first section will be, how on earth do we leaders even have a grasp of what we're going to need in the future? Yeah. How on earth do we know? And I don't have the answers yet. I will have some answers. I have some ideas. And the second one will be, if we do, once we do have an idea, now how do we get those shifts going? Because there is not going to be the same sense of urgency as we've had during the pandemic. And change is hard. Yeah. So what can you start now to create those shifts and others? So anyway, I would love to interview people on either or both of those sections.
Well, we will put all the links in the show notes for people to figure out how to get to you. And
okay, yeah, sorry, I went on about that. Yeah,
listeners,
you can share my email as well.
We will field if you want to be part of that. You can reach out to me, and I will definitely connect you to Lori as well.
Yeah. And LinkedIn is my platform. So my name, Lori Michele Leavitt, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram and at Pivot Catalyst.
And the listeners who are driving and are looking at their podcast, it's LoriMicheleLeavitt. There you go. So we'll put that in there.
Thank you.
All right. You ready to go down Fun Street? You sound like you've been having fun the whole time. She's smiling.
Sure.
Listeners need to know she's smiling ear to ear. She's very happy. And then again, she's in a great part of the country and she's got her stuff together. So she's doing it. So ready. Can you share with the listeners what you shared with me was one of your all-time favorite movies?
Oh, one of my all-time favorite movies, The Dead Poets Society.
And why does that movie connect so much with you?
Well, one reason is my ex-spouse and I had a fabulous conversation, one of few I can probably count on my hands that we had after that movie. So connection is huge with me, and we really had a connection over talking about that movie. The other is I mentioned the three traits, and I was thinking about the movie as I talk about this and trying to connect it to the rest of this talk. All of those were shown in that movie. The ability to look, the willingness to have the courage to be vulnerable and quote, look stupid, jump on a desk and start spouting, right? That's to people who are looking at you like, what on earth are you doing? And the resistance, what blocks clarity and what blocks your ability to shift. And anyway, love the movie.
Yeah, no, it really is good. Tough one to watch over and over. That's one of those, but it's so good. And yours, and on top of missing Robin Williams, part of that. That's probably when you made the move from being always really funny to being a serious actor too, right? That was probably the point there.
Brilliant.
We're going to do the speed round of Fun Street, and this is going to be fun. And I know you listen to the show, so you kind of know how this goes. So you may have had a head start, but that being said, I'll try to adapt. I'll try to pivot appropriately to the pivot catalyst. Here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something. I want the first thing that comes to your mind. These are things that lift you up, motivate you, make you feel good. They basically make you thrive. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Of late, right about now, I know you just came back from Mexico. A song maybe that you've been listening to, or one that pumps you up.
Well, the only one that comes to mind is one that every time I hear it, I am touched by it. And no matter who plays it, because it's been played by others, I'll explain this, is when my guitar gently weeps.
Oh, good one.
And one of the reasons I love this song is, I mean, have you listened to the words? I mean, it's really he's totally in flow. I call that in business, I call that momentum. Yeah. He's totally in flow. He's noticing little details like dust. and so he's noticing, which is a good thing. And it doesn't break him from his momentum. He's still playing his guitar. And it's just a lovely.
I think you're all about presence in a weird part, like being in the moment. I can't think of anything that would more effectively manage that, but I love that comparison to alignment, momentum, and flow. I love that. A favorite food of yours that is not a dessert?
Salmon.
Favorite dessert?
I don't eat a lot of dessert.
But if you did,
I'm going to say cheesecake.
Oh, are you like a New York cheesecake or an Italian cheesecake type of person? Like this one's a little more regatta cheese versus cream cheese, but you don't care. She's like,
I don't care.
Cheesecake, if you had to have it.
Cheesecake.
An activity you wish you did more of?
Hiking. Last year, I went to Estes Park in Colorado. And honestly, I mean, just hiking all day long in some place that's beautiful. Yeah. And I was going to climb Rainier, and I said no to that. And the reason I said no to it was because it's just a challenge. Yeah. And while I say I'm an achiever, I'm not an achiever in a sense that I just want to do something so that I can get to the highest peak. So I can go 11,000 feet in Colorado, and I'm at a beautiful lake or something. And yeah, so I would love to do more of that. It was fantastic.
An activity you wish you did less of?
Something I would do less of, an activity. Oh gosh, I don't know. Work.
I think you like your work, so I don't necessarily. I think it's like busy.
I do like.
I'm going to go with busy work. I could tell that's probably more busy work.
Yeah. Oh, I have a phrase. I call it full, not busy. Oh. And so you're right. I do have an aversion to busy. Yep. It blocks me sometimes even from doing things because, oh my gosh, if I do that, will I get too busy?
Totally get it.
So, yeah.
If I were to snap my fingers, and you could be anywhere in the world, where are you?
Oh. Well, I haven't been to Venice yet, and I want to go. One of my favorite places, I lived in France for a couple of years, and we got to travel around. And the place that I remember most is Lucerne, Switzerland. Have you been there?
I have not, but heard it's quite gorgeous and beautiful.
I woke up in the morning early. I went for a run, sparkling blue sky. You're running across bridges that are centuries old. One of them is burnt down since. And you run into the town, and they're they're washing the walls of their buildings, which have beautiful murals on them.
Enough said.
It was fabulous.
Lori Michele Leavitt, the Pivot Catalyst. Thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud today. Truly a pleasure connecting with you. Keep doing what you're doing. This is great stuff. And thank you for sharing your wisdom here today on Thrive Loud.
Thank you.
To all the listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep moving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out in the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.